Good morning. This is the special meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. It is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024, and it's 10 o'clock. My name is Jeff Randall. I am president of the board of the Jefferson PUD Commissioners, and I am calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So before we get going, let's have a roll call of commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm commissioner for District 1 and president of the board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3, and just in advance, I'm going to turn my video off. It's a little glitchy on my end on the Zoom here, so let me know if there's any issues with my sound.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And the board is all present and accounted for. Agenda review, we have backup point discussion, the manager's report, and the PUD procurement manual on the agenda. I also got a phone call from an individual who lives on 49th Street with a question about trees. Do we have anybody here from 49th Street? Okay. So other commissioners, normally we don't have a general or a public comment period for items not on the agenda. Would you have any objection to adding? I guess I'm going to just propose that we add a public comment period for items not on the agenda prior to manager's report, because apparently it's a timeliness issue. Some trees are proposed to be removed before our next meeting. Is there any objection to adding that?
I don't have any objection. We just can't take any action in a special meeting is my understanding of the rules.
Yeah, understood, and I'm not anticipating that. So I propose that we adopt the agenda with that modification. Do we have a motion for that?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of the modified agenda. All in support of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye, we have an approved agenda. So I don't have the language in front of me, but basically, when we do a public comment period for items not on the agenda, you can just raise your hand and request to speak. If you want to, please indicate your name and your location, your address, but you don't have to. It lists those things, but it is helpful for us to know the context. And then please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And do we have anybody who would like to make a public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, yes.
Okay.
And to be picked up audio wise, if you can stand and come closer to this mic that's in the middle of the room, you'll be able to be seen. That's fine. Even just in that vicinity, consider standing.
Okay.
Thank you. And
So-
please proceed.
Good morning. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Addie Thornton and I live in the city limits of Port Townsend. I'm here to address the Board of Commissioners about the letter I received from PUD regarding the reed conductor upgrade and their plans for the trees lining our lots on 49th Street. These trees offer major sound buffering and extensive privacy from the main road traffic, as well as presenting pleasing aesthetics. The removal of these trees will destroy all of this, as well as negatively impact the property values. Driving through my neighborhood, there are many western red cedar trees that have been top trimmed and bead. They're healthy and the wires do not appear to be impeded. Some of our trees that PUD has plans for as early as April 15th have also been bead and well maintained, so they do not appear to present a hazard to the electrical lines. My question to you is, how is the tree trimming policy equally applied to all of the trees in the area? We've contacted multiple county utility companies, including Puget Sound Energy, which manages several counties. We've also contacted Esplund and Kent West. There were various interpretations of the RCW 6412035. However, they were unified in their approach to tree management. They all expressed conservation over removal, and PSE talked of their policy to include the homeowner in all decision-making. We're aware of the additional federal funding of $5.4 million to PUD District Number 1 in 2023. How much of this is being allocated towards the preservation of trees as opposed to the removal? I question this because my trees have not been responsible for any power outages. The conservation of my trees will continue to offer a windbreak and wildlife habitat. They also provide integrity to the other tree's stability. Equally as important, they prevent erosion to the existing slope towards the road, which mitigates any water runoff as well as any road surfacing issues. With 49th Street being a main road, these trees also act as a safety barrier. The PUD operation is to upgrade the overhead reconductor with the addition of 2 upper lines. The utility pole is unobstructed, PUD having resolved any obstructions last year. My final question is, why is it necessary to remove these trees? Why can't the trees be maintained as they've been? It takes far less money to trim a tree than to remove and chip it. Driving around Port Townsend, there are many trees that have similar positions and trimming needs in relation to the power lines. Why these trees? And if this is the new policy, in which all the trees of this nature will be slated to meet the same fate as my trees, we will have a most unfortunately changed landscape, which would diminish the natural beauty of Port Townsend. This is more a sustainability issue than an infrastructure or budgetary problem. The Western red cedar is a culturally significant tree and considered the tree of life to Indigenous tribes of Puget Sound. The life and presence of these trees have great value beyond transitory budgetary needs and issues. Thank you for your
10 seconds.
thank you for your consideration. We need to preserve them. And I would request council with you at the tree site sometime this week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for preparing your comments and keeping it under 3 minutes. We appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Not seeing any hands in the room. Do we have any online? Looks like not. So I did swing by that stretch of road over the weekend. I took some photos, and I wondered, Kevin, if during your manager's report, you could maybe give the commissioners an update on the issue, and maybe we could put the pictures up as we talk about it, so the other 2 commissioners can kind of get a sense for what that looks like. Is that acceptable to the other commissioners? Proceeding in that way? It's just, again, it's just discussion. It's not, I'm not anticipating any decisions or anything. Just wanted to give.
I have no objections.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we can move on to manager's report. And Kevin, at whatever time appropriate manager's report, if you wouldn't mind speaking to this issue.
Yeah, we'll have Joy go first.
Okay.
The update.
Great.
Okay, yes, so good morning. I wanted to provide an update about the capacity charge. We had a meeting March 5th, presentation from FCS, Gordon Wilson attended. And so I just want to give a quick update about what's been going on with that and next steps. So just as a refresher, the calculated capacity charge was a maximum defensible charge for both electric and water systems. So for electric, the electric capacity charge should reflect costs associated with substations, transmission lines, and other upstream infrastructure that is affected by growth, but not recovered by developer extension fees. And then similarly, water system development charge should reflect costs associated with the functions of service for water. Those include supply and treatment, storage, pumping, transmission and distribution, and hydrants. And so the calculated charges for electric are $5,376 for a capacity charge for electric, and then for water, it's $4,065. Now, the electric is a slightly bit lower based on a load diversity weighting at 80%, I think. So we can get into that a little bit more in a subsequent meeting. But anyway, as a reminder, the board can choose to impose either, this maximum defensible charge or something lower.
Okay.
Also, one thing we've been talking about is legal authority and what program design would look like. Still kind of working through that with Joel. But chapter 54 of the RCW does grant broad authority to fix rates and charges. The principle of equitable share is present here. Charges must be in proportion to the new development share of the total system cost. This, again, just reminders. All this was shared at the March 5th meeting. And Jefferson PUD can elect to reduce the electric system capacity charge and water capacity charge for qualified low-income housing projects when eligibility and financial criteria are met. So we did talk a little bit about that too. So next steps. At the May 7th meeting, we would like to present a recommendation and request a resolution to implement, I'm kind of checking with Kevin here.
Right.
To implement the capacity charge for both electric and water services. So that recommendation would include, is it the full, defensible charge or some lower percentage of that? And also what would our low income development discount look like, that program? So again, just a quick refresher on that, and we'll be bringing that back on May 7th.
Okay, so it sounds like it'll come back to commissioners on May 7th for discussion and possible action. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Joy or staff at this point? Ken, you're muted.
Not at this point. Thank you.
Dan?
So I'm not sure what staff is still working on exactly. I know FCS obviously is doing some work. The May 7th, I don't know about a necessarily resolution on that date in case there's more information that comes to light or if we have some public comment or whatever. I do hope that we can get some sort of decision made on this issue before we get into budget discussions for the 2025 budget. So we know where our revenues and expenses are.
Okay. And I guess just from my viewpoint, I think, it'll be like a first touch in terms of having a full presentation and all the information. I too think the sooner we're starting to send some signals to the development community and to people who are looking to hook up. Everything you're saying to me indicates you've heard what the issues are and you're going to be presenting us with information and options on all the issues. So I feel like we're on a good path and I have no objections to having us take it up on May 17th. I guess one question is, are we doing anything in terms of outreach beyond, the information we're presenting at these meetings? Are we anticipating doing anything in the paper, any press releases, or any kind of discussion of not just what we're looking at doing and that it's defensible, but I think kind of a background on the need for it? Because when we first talked about this, we talked about we have 3 possible streams of revenue. We can gain revenue by rates. We can borrow money to invest, but those repayments, that we have to find a way to pay for that. Then the third way is this capacity charge idea. So I think getting people to understand how utilities work and what our options are and how rates are kind of, okay, everybody now is paying for things through rates versus if you borrow or you do capacity charges, it's kind of a different way to look at the fairness of how do we pay for things. And I guess just planting the seed, it might help us in terms of the people who come to the meeting, them understanding the issues better and understanding what our options are and understanding what the need is.
I like that idea, and I think we can discuss internally about how we might, write something up for, like the newsletter or something
Sure.
like that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and if possible, newsletter and I think a press release, to the PDN and the Port Townsend Leader, I think it could help us in terms of people coming prepared and then they can engage in the most positive way possible.
Engineering has been talking to, some of the other staff has been talking to some developers, letting them know that this has been coming for a while, so that
Okay.
at least in some of the construction community, the word's out there.
Okay, I guess one other connection I think that can be made that people understand is kind of equating it to system development charges that cities and some counties have and other utilities in terms of not having the ratepayers pay for everything, but having, people who are now connecting, helping. The idea of the ratepayers have paid for everything we have. When somebody new comes in, it's kind of their chance to help contribute to the infrastructure also being there in the future, just like the ratepayers have. So I think that helps with the idea of fairness, realizing that this is something that all utilities face, that we don't just have to pay for what we have today, we have to invest in what we need tomorrow and 20 years down the road. Okay, please continue with the staff report.
I'll talk a little bit about the trees on 49th Street.
And Will, if you could call the pictures up, and when I see the pictures, I'll try and describe which angle they're taken from, since it was the one who took them, but I think it might help the commissioners as you talk about this.
So, what we're trying to do off of 49th Street, approximately from the fairgrounds to Cook Avenue, we're taking the single phase line down, putting 3-phase lines up. This year, we had an extremely difficult time in the Cook Avenue, 49th Street area with power outages and maintaining a reliable system. One thing that I'm gonna share a little bit about, when the system is running during cold load, everything will work fine until we have an outage. A tree goes through the line or their branch comes on the line. Once the power goes out, to re-energize takes 4 to 5 times the amount of capacity to re-energize the line than it does to maintain the line when it's running. So based on this, we came up with a plan to increase reliability in this area by going from a single phase line to 3-phase line. A couple reasons. It allowed us to split the load so that during cold load operations, we were picking up less load per line than we were when it was a single phase line. Also, the 3-phase line gives us a little bit more reliability because we do come through and we clean out some of the tree. We did this exact same process down where you turn the corner off of on Cook Avenue. We took out approximately 40 trees, the same type tree on that stretch because of outages and what that neighborhood had gone through. We have had outages in this area, approximately 2 spans away, wired down, and the wire was in these trees and brush for several hours. We had to have the police department there to block off roads to make sure no one can drive across the wire that actually comes across the road. So we have had problems in this area throughout the winter. We have a responsibility as a PUD to try to build and maintain a reliable system. That is not only a goal, but it's a requirement. And for us to make the system reliable for the people at the end of this line, we have to do a lot of work from the fairgrounds all the way to Cook and beyond. So it is a reliability issue. When the lines go down, it causes fires. We have a lot of issues in this area that we're trying to fix. So as staff, we feel we have to take these trees down to do phase 2 of our distribution line expansion. It will be a more reliable system. It will be a safer system. We won't have the fire dangers we do have now. And it is, these trees are on the road right away. They're not trees in somebody's yard. These are trees along the road that are in the public right away. They're in the road right away. So trust me, we don't go around and look for trees to cut down. We have a schedule. We try to do the tree work that needs to be done when we're doing the work in the area. There are many places where the trees have to be trimmed and cut down. It was pointed out that Port Townsend is one of those areas that needs some tree work. And we are sending out letters to the Port Townsend area. We are diligently trying to find areas that need to be worked, do the work for reliability and fire dangers. It's a requirement of the PUD. So from staff's point of view, we are gonna move forward and take these trees down through this stretch so that we can build the line required and hopefully increase reliability and fire danger.
Kevin, what's the schedule on that work? I guess from beginning to completion?
The The trees are scheduled to be taken out Monday or Tuesday of next week. The poles are supposed to arrive the following week, and then our crews will go in, very similar like they did at the fairgrounds. Our crews do the work, they'll set the poles, probably a week to get this second phase done. Once this one's done, we will marshal on to the next phase through this stretch.
Okay, and Will, could you just click on the other pictures I sent you? There, that's looking back towards the fairgrounds, and then the one on the right is looking out towards the bluff. So the trees we're looking at on the right-hand photo, they're on the left-hand side, and on the left-hand photo, they're on the right-hand side. Commissioners have any questions? I see, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin answered one of my questions, which these trees are in the right of way. So I guess one of the, it's not a question, maybe it's a comment or an ask, is that maybe we put up, what the RCW or the state statutes are for, what the ability to remove trees within either the, the utility right of way or the road right of ways are, so that people can see, the authority that we're acting under. If we maybe put that on the website somewhere, or, include that in any sort of information that goes out for future reference on this type of issues as we move forward on other projects.
Ken, did you have any questions or comments?
Yes. Could you explain, Kevin, why trimming the trees for this stretch is not an option as opposed to taking the trees down?
So the trees are right underneath the power line, and for our policy, if they're right underneath the power line, we take the trees out for construction. And we're putting together a program for the board. This year, we spend approximately $1 million for tree trimming. We were hoping to be able to spend $1 million and get through our system in 7 years and keep trimming trees. The way the growth is now and what we've done in the last 2-3 years, and we'll have more information next week on this. We're getting about half the required distance done versus what the growth coming back is. So it is partially a budgetary, it's a safety concern, because if we just top them, they do turn and come up, but it doesn't eliminate the fire danger that we have throughout our territory. So our policy is underneath in right of ways or easements, because this is an easement through the city. We do take the tree.
So, Kevin, I have a couple questions too, and the other commissioners, if you have any more questions, feel free to raise your hand. So we have, like other utilities, we have a list of trees that are appropriate under power lines, don't we, on our website or somewhere in our policies?
We have trees that are like pre-approved to go underneath, slow growing, not very tall. I believe they're on the website, but we will talk to Will and he'll verify that if they're not there now, that we will get them there. Because they were part of the policy.
And I think a lot of these trees are western red cedar, as was indicated. There might be some Doug firs in there too. Both of those are trees that, they're trying to grow 100 feet high. And they're not on the tree list because of that. If these were trees that were more of the type that are approved for under utility lines, and they were here, would we be taking those trees out too? Because you're making it sound like any trees under the power lines would come out. If they were trees that were on the list of okay to be under the power lines, because, and even if they get a little taller, they can be pruned easier and they don't try to grow 100 feet, would they be able to stay or would they be going to?
So it depends on the tree type. If the tree is in the power line burning and it's gotten so big because it's been trimmed so many times, we may take that down because of how the tree is grown. If we're working on a specific area like this, certain size of trees that are very small, we will take them now versus let them grow up depending on the species. So in some cases, yes, if it was a small tree and it can't grow in the line, we would leave it. In other cases that some of the trees that people traditionally think is slow growing and won't get in the line, eventually do, so that tree we may take. But
Okay, so, but there are ones that are more like the ones approved on the tree list for under power lines that would stay.
Yep.
If we think they're not gonna grow up into
And
power lines in the
if,
future.
if you go down Cook where we took the 40 trees, was that a year ago, year and a half ago? They have, the homeowners have replanted some trees along their fence line. They're not right underneath the line, they've moved them back a little bit, but yes, there's approved trees that would stay.
Okay, and then you indicated this is planning to start on Monday, but you and I spoke just before the meeting. Is there any flexibility on our start time? Cause I'm just kind of wondering if the other commissioners would like any more information on this stretch. And if we could put it on next week's agenda to discuss a little bit more. Is there any flexibility on the start time, or is that kind of hard to start? And I know,
The commission-
I know I'm kind of putting you on the
Yeah,
spot.
the commissioners can direct me to do certain things. Our start time, as everyone knows, we notify customers by letter, we put signs out. We could postpone it a week, probably not any longer, because we do have schedules, we do try to do this work in a timely fashion. So to postpone it a week, doesn't hurt us, we can make sure that the contractor moves to a different area.
Okay, so Ken, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I'm not sure what postponing it a week will accomplish. It doesn't sound like that there is any alternative and that taking the trees out is the appropriate thing to do.
So my only comment is that there are a lot of trees in the city rights of way are wide. They go well beyond the pavement. And when you, as an ex-city planner for Port Townsend, as you walk around our town, there are lots of places where the trees do exactly this. They kind of come into the road, they kind of frame the road, and if we were to take all the trees out and all the rights of way, it would feel like a really different place. And they do provide value in a lot of ways, but I recognize too that these may be trees that these particular species in this particular location just may not be compatible with the long-term maintenance of the power lines. And what I'm hearing you say, Kevin, is our goal is to have a 7-year rotation on tree maintenance. And part of that is when we go through, not just to trim trees that are long-term gonna keep trying to grow into the power lines, but take those out and encourage replacement with appropriate vegetation that won't long-term grow into the power lines and can be, trimmed a little bit if necessary. So I would be open to having it on the agenda next time and postponing it a week, but I guess I'm looking to the other commissioners to see what your appetite is for it.
So this is Commissioner Tupper. I'm agnostic to waiting another week if the general manager doesn't think there's an added expense or disruption in, the projects. I'm fine with that. I'm with Commissioner Collins in the sense, as long as we're within our policies, existing policies and our existing rights, I don't know what would exactly change between now and next week with this particular group of trees. Now, if we need to revisit, our tree trimming and vegetation management policy, that's fine. We could do that down the road. But in this particular instance, I don't know what would change between now and next week. Maybe someone could weigh in and maybe there's something I've missed or not understanding.
And Joel has his hand up.
So, thank you.
And for those who don't know, Joel's our attorney.
So I'll just add that, with the statute grants the PUD authority, any utility, the authority to address trees within its rights of way and where the lines are. And the reason for that is the extreme risk and liability of fires from contact with our lines. So it's a balancing act, and it tries to address the concerns, the valid and reasonable concerns that residents have about cutting trees versus the risk out there to the utility and the community, frankly, from fires starting from these lines. So I think I'm just bringing that up as just another element to consider as.
Okay, thanks, Joel. And Dan, you had your hand up. Did you have anything else to say?
Yeah, Joel brought up another issue there about the fire in particular. The general manager and I have been attending some county meetings that they have a contractor that are working with local fire and other entities on it's called the Wildland Urban Interface, which they talk about trees and moving forward with how the county and the fire department want to see things happen. So, I think that this particular instance here is an example of why that work is being done and why the utility moving forward is probably going to have to do more of this type of work for liability issues and again, one other thing is I believe legal counsel maybe can weigh in that we're working on our fire mitigation plan now. And this is an instance of where we might be able a learning experience of to what's going to be in that policy. So just so the public knows, we are updating our wildfire or wildland mitigation plan. So if anyone wanted to weigh in on that real quick as well, that might be something the public might need to hear about.
Well,
Okay.
one of the reasons we're doing that is because the state has mandated it and in fact is developing a model policy for all local utilities to adopt. So yeah, good point.
Okay. And I don't know what next week's agenda looks like. I guess I would ask that we delay the start a week. It would give me a chance to meet with my constituents on the site and just walk the property and talk to them about their options. And I think it would give staff a chance to kind of answer these questions of how does our current policy about trees in the right of way balance tree removal versus conservation? So, do you have a sense for the agenda next week, Kevin, if there's room on it for that? And would the other commissioners be okay with that process?
I'm okay with it.
Kevin,
Yeah, I'm
you-
fine.
You feel like you have room for that on the next meeting agenda?
We can put on the next meeting agenda, we can move things around.
And you
so.
can delay the project a week also?
Yeah, we can delay the project. Again, though, this is what hurts the PUD. We do tend to delay projects and then it's harder to get them started.
Understood.
In this case, a week delay isn't huge, but we take our job serious, reliability we take seriously, and this project is being driven by our customers on the end of the line.
Right.
For us as staff and management, it's, we have to be more reliable with the people at the end of the line. And these trees make it so we're not gonna be reliable.
And what was the name of that project again that we had so many issues with that we had the
Albatross.
that's not the name of the project,
That's
is
the
it?
road.
That's the road.
But there's a name for the houses out there that they said, I can't remember, but it's Trailcrest, yeah, so we had, for those people here, we had many meetings with folks from Trailcrest here who lost power for multiple days and it was going on and off and was causing lots of issues. So we're kind of got this project as a way of improving reliability and peak load power that we can deliver in times of our peak loads happen when the weather gets really cold. All the, people's heat goes on and there's more houses being built out there. So we're trying to maintain systems like that. So given all that, sounds like we're gonna delay the project a week. But we're gonna have it on the agenda next Tuesday and I'm happy to schedule a meeting with the neighbors out there to walk and kind of talk about your options. So any further questions or comments at this time?
No, I thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Do we have more staff report? Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for indulging us and working through that. I think that's a healthy way to respond to our customer owners and help educate folks on our issues and be a publicly owned utility. So well done. Okay, next item is the Beckett Point discussion. Who's leading us on that? And thank you so much.
I am gonna leave that. I'm gonna try to share my screen here.
Okay,
See how
If
you
you
do.
could please identify yourself for everybody.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Canfield, and first of all, thank you guys for making room for us on the agenda. I really appreciate it. And I'll take just a minute to introduce the folks from our committee who are here. We've had a committee working on our law system for almost 3 years now, and we've been working with you guys for the last couple. And several of those people are here. Ed Edwards, John Anderson, Barb and Breyer, who are traveling through Florida, I think are on. Alec Lang and Don Forth will be joining at 11. And then Steve Ardall, our association president, is here, and I see Vern Holmes too, one of our association members is here as well. So let me try this.
We make that full size too. There you go. You know.
Okay. All right, so I wanted to kind of briefly take you guys through the presentation. We're not, you all got a copy of the study, and we're not going to go through the study in detail today. But we're going to go through, hit some of the highlights, summaries. We've got a proposal we'd like to make to you guys. But at the end of that, if you've got any questions about the study specifically, we're happy to answer those as well. So,
And just a quick question, has staff seen this presentation yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is new to everybody.
okay, but you have seen the study, right? Good. Not new to Ken, actually, we went over it with Ken Collins
Okay.
a few weeks ago. So, and we spent, just so you know, we spent about $10,000 on the study, so it was a good expenditure for our small little community, but we think we got good value. So the study objectives were, we wanted to outline what are the requirements for operating our loss.
And could you define what loss is?
Yeah, large on-site septic system.
Thank you.
And we actually have two of them. We refer to it as one, but it's like two 14,500 capacity loss systems. We wanted to outline the requirements for operating those. We want to maximize that asset life. That's a very big investment for our community. We want to minimize the operating and maintenance costs specifically, and then in part, reduce those ongoing costs so we can actually afford to self-fund some operating and capital reserve accounts.
Do you mind if we ask questions as you go?
No, it's good.
Okay, who owns the system?
That's part of the question. This was done with LUD funds, and so the PUD owns and manages the system, but it was funded through the LUD system, so the
Property owners.
property owners paid for
Okay,
the system.
okay.
Yeah, we could have a long discussion. I think there's some differing opinions. There's some differing opinions on, but I'm not sure that matters. Let's go through it. I think our proposal. Yeah,
It doesn't matter.
yeah, our proposal is within the way we're operating today. Okay, so the approach we took to the study, we hired an expert with ties to the local wastewater community. We benchmarked with, or he benchmarked with municipal systems, other loss systems, and other operators, including private operators. We summarized the information that we got working with you guys over the last couple of years and working with Randy. We evaluated best-in-class approaches from all those different operators and systems. We compared costs for like services, identified opportunities to eliminate work, defined areas where we think is possibility for increased attention, and then looked at technology improvements. The person who did the study is Mike Morin. He owns Aquis Solutions Engineering out of Bellingham. He was actually the lead designer for our system back in 2005, 2007, when he worked for Parametrics. And he started Aquis Solutions in 2009.
He's got 25 years' experience with wastewater system engineering. He's designed a ton of systems throughout the community. He redid the one over in QFC that Scholl is operating. I think he is currently installing a new system for the Gates compound on Lake Washington. So he has designed and installed a lot of systems, and not only that, he works with those system operators kind of throughout the life of the system to make sure they're operated well and have good long system life. Our general conclusions is our loss is in good shape. The service on failures has been very prompt. Randy is great. If we have
And that's Randy, last name.
Call.
Thank you.
Yeah, generally, if we get a residential grinder pump failure, he's out there within a couple hours getting that repaired. And Randy's kind of almost one of the family now. Everyone kind of knows him and calls him when they have a problem. Some of the activities though we think should be eliminated, and we'll get into that in more detail. Some procedures we feel need to be added, or we need to see if they need to be added. The proposed rate of 115.36 for 2025 is about 2 times what the study outcome suggests that it should cost to run our system. And we have opportunities for technology improvements, which is not surprising. Our system is 15 years old. There's a lot of pretty common technology improvements that we could enhance our system. Okay, so one of the problems you get into when you try to do benchmarking on these kind of systems is they're all kind of bespoke, right? There's no 2 systems that are exactly the same, but they use common elements. So many systems with grinder pumps, many systems with lift stations and lift pumps and drain fields, and so the way that Mike laid this information out, and he, as you saw in the study, he benchmarked a lot of people. Is he broke it down to what are the activities and costs associated with operating the system. And he broke that down into 10 separate categories. And then within each one of these categories, then he broke out, okay, what is the activity that needs to happen, on what frequency, about how much time is required, and what's the cost associated with that. And then he check those costs with each one of those operators where they had similar systems. So if you got grinder pumps, how much time you spend on grinder pumps, at what frequency, that kind of stuff. And then we broke it out into the cost of each one of those elements. And then, so this first category is routine inspection and maintenance. For this, you can see he used an hourly rate, a fully loaded hourly rate of $100 an hour.
And where is that shown? Is that in the unit cost?
It's up there toward the top there, you see that?
Okay, hourly rate, O&M technician, $100 an hour, and just. Was your group able to plug in the actual costs of staff at the PUD because we have unions and we have all the benefits, et cetera? Is that reflective of what our staff costs are?
I'm not sure how they came up with $100.
No, I'm saying that they've done some math and come up with 100. Did we provide their group what our staff costs are?
In meetings past, Mike has showed what Randy's time is, that kind of stuff.
Okay, and I guess
We didn't have Randy's fully loaded costs.
Okay, yeah, we never.
But if you look at this, we went and said, okay, Mike came up with a number looking at private operators.
Right,
So
industry standard kind of out there.
his range was 75 to 125, so we just picked 100. But it doesn't have a huge impact. If you change that number to $200 an hour, it only changes the net cost by $10 per month.
That's helpful.
Because they're just, if we skinny down the work, it's only 110 hours a year, so it doesn't really have a huge impact.
Okay, not a huge percentage of the overall cost.
No.
Okay.
And then this is laid out a little, Mike laid this out a little differently. You'll see that there's 10 monthly routine inspections. That's because in the semi-annual inspection visit, you're also doing the monthly visit. And in the annual visit, you're doing the semi-annual and the monthly. So it's just The chart calls out 10 monthly, 1 semi-annual, and 1 annual. That's just the way he kind of laid out the chart, which you'll see later why I explained that to you. So the cost for the, total cost, for the routine inspection and maintenance on an annual basis, about $11,000. Annual permit fees to the state are about $2,400. Grinder pumps, Randy's done a nice job of tracking which pumps go out on what frequency. We've had over the last 8 years, 5.2 failures. We use 5.5 here.
So that per year, sorry,
Yep,
about 5 point, how many units are total on that system?
100.
So you got about a 5% failure per year, 6%.
We do. We have a 5% failure rate, 5.2. Correct Equipment, who's the regional supplier for those pumps, said that the average is closer to 7 to 10. But our pumps get used pretty lightly. We only use like 12% of the capacity of our system. So
Right,
a lot of folks are only there, a
right.
few weeks out of the year. Correct Equipment would charge us $4,500 for labor and materials to replace one of those pumps. Category 4, we've lost one, as far as we know, we've lost one of the central lift station grinder pumps in the 15 years we've had the system running. Those pumps, the lower pumps, cost about $15,000 a piece. There's 4 of them. The upper pumps are about $10,000. So we used the $15,000 over 15 years, came up with $1,000 a year. Septic tank pumping, that happens about every 18 months. We use 12,000 gallon, which is the capacity of one of those tanks, on an annual basis, and 66 cents per gallon. Got a quote from Dano Septic, who said they would actually do the pump out for 50 cents a gallon. So we think that number is right in the ballpark there. $1,400 for drain field mowing. That came from an invoice from you guys when we were meeting with you. That happens twice a year, so $2,800. Routine, non-scheduled, non-routine service. We gave that about 2 hours a year. It looked like in 2021, when you guys gave us the numbers, it was less than that. It was about $1,400. We put $2,400 in here. We assumed $2,500 for parts. The annual electric, we got that information from the actual meter readings from Kevin, and they gave us the rate that they would charge us for that 3-phase meter, or 3-phase meters. And then Randy said that he spends, and this is non-routine, it's sporadic, but if someone wants to put in a new grinder pump, or they need to get a line located or something like that, he's the interface for that. So we gave that 8 hours a month, which is probably generous, but it was hard to estimate. So we put in about $10,000 to cover that. So all in, we've got $68,660. If you divide that by the 100 hookups that are currently paying you guys for service, and you divide that by 12 months, you come up with $57 per hookup per month. And then we looked, okay, let's kind of do the sniff test.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan, you had a question?
Yeah, maybe for a little more background or reference too on the way we operate, the systems or manage the systems. It looks like we're taking in this presentation, we're taking into account already in some of these costs for the cost of improvement or replacements. So to Kevin, my question is do we have a large general kind of a emergency reserve account for major, like just say they developed a leak in one of the big tanks or something like that? Do they pay for that just as one group, or do we have a large reserve account that covers all of them? I mean, how do we deal with things like that? Is that baked into our rates?
Yeah, there's no reserve account for this group. It would have to be.
Kevin, your mic's off.
There's no reserve account for this group. It would have to be funded through rates, like we fund a lot of improvements.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we think it would make sense for us to self-fund. Capital reserve might make sense for us to do, for both operating and capital reserve to allow us to make improvements to the system and if we had a major expensive failure.
Thanks for that information.
So then we said, okay, so how do these numbers look? So we took Mike's numbers and we said, okay, let's go compare those to the race study you guys did. Let's compare it to some private numbers we got from some operators. The biggest difference was in the monthly or routine inspections. It shows up there 5,500, but it's actually 12 times a year, not 10, so it's $6,600. Pretty much everyone we talked to, private operators, correct equipment, some of the other law systems said that they would inspect and maintain the system once a month. Right now for our system, Randy's having to go out there 2 to 3 times a week for 3 to 4 hours a visit. And most of his time is on, washing down the lift station tanks to prevent the scum buildup on those tanks. And then doing monitoring of the residential grinder pump alarm lights. But that is very much not common. And in fact, we went to Correct Equipment and said, hey, you sell these pumps. Do you have any other system out there that requires this? And they said no. So this is the biggest opportunity for savings here in the costs, the rate study you guys did. Actually, sorry, in the numbers that we got from Mike and Samantha for the 2021, this was 90% of Randy's time, was $30,000. If you include the general overhead rate from the rate study of 55%, that comes out to almost $47,000 compared to $6,600. It's almost 7 times the cost. So this is the big opportunity for us to get in, work with Randy, understand why is our system requiring this unique level of manual intervention, and then figure out how to resolve that. And then this is the.
I have a question. Kevin, could you go back and be really specific about the items that would be eliminated or reduced in order to achieve that cost savings?
Sure. The cost savings we have. So for that, it's mainly in that monthly routine inspection. And so in order to get to those numbers, we gave it 5.5 hours a month. The private operators we talked to said they'd be out, they'd give it 3 or 4 hours a month. Right now, Randy is out there during the peak months, 12 hours per week. So 48 hours in a month. And so what we would have to change is instead of going out 3 times a week, he goes out once a month. Or twice, if he goes out twice a month for 2.5 hours, it's going to be kind of the same thing. But we get that multiple times a week inspection down to once a month, which is very much the industry standard. And it should be doable. And if there's a requirement that we put in some automatic flush on those tanks to keep him from having to go out there, we're happy to do that. We are happy to self-fund that. And then the other thing with checking the on the residential grinder pumps, pretty much everyone universally, the residents report the outages, and we do that too. Even going out there 3 times a week, Randy's only there 5% of the time, and the chance that we're gonna catch the grinder pump failure during that small percentage of the time is pretty small. And he's done a nice job. He's got his cards and all of the controllers. Everyone knows who to call. I would say 99% of the failures we've had, it's the resident or the neighbor who's noticed it and called you guys. And then, like I said, they're out there pretty quickly. So that is the major difference, is we need to get down to, you guys only have to come out and look at that system once a month, or twice a month, but you're not spending 4 hours 3 times a week.
Okay.
And how does that square with the most recent recommendation of Mr. Moran, who designed the system?
That is his recommendation. He actually, we're trying to figure out how we got into that. Like, why is our system 3 times a week? We went back and we looked at the original engineering study that he did. And he actually had multiple visits a week, twice a week, to visit that system.
That was built into the recommended design of
That-
how to operate it.
That was in the original engineering design, and it wasn't the manual that got sent to the state, it was just the recommendation that came out. And we said, well, Mike, why did you recommend that? He goes, well, it was the first system I ever designed, and that's way overkill, it shouldn't be in there. In his study, he addresses that like, no one does this, it shouldn't be required. He actually called the state and talked with the state and said, is there anything in there that you guys have that would require this level of attention? And they said, no. And he said, I put it in my original report, I was a young engineer, and they said, that's fine, if you need to, we'll correct it, but there's no study filed with the state, so no correction is actually required.
Yeah.
So we think we kind of started out, if Randy came in as a new operator, conscientious as he is, he probably read that report and we started down that path, and we've probably done it the same way ever since. So
Do you have more presentation or is that?
I do have more presentation. So this is the pie chart we got from you guys. You can see the other, the big gray area is that time, multiple weekly, and the other pie chart elements are the other things that Randy spends his time on. So you see, for instance, the orange area is non-routine maintenance, $1,400. So we use some of this data, I gave some of this data to Mike. We also said, well, how about that annual, inspection and maintenance? How does that number look? And so we went out and we got 2 outside quotes. One was from Dano Septic down in Bremerton. And they gave us a quote for the total annual cost of that was $6,000 per year. They have a 2-hour round trip commute from Bremerton. And they would do annual lateral flushing of the drain field laterals, which we don't think is happening today. We need to check to make sure. The other group was Water Wastewater Services out of Monroe. They quoted closer to $12,000, but they got a 5-hour round trip commute coming across the ferry. And they would spend 2 full days of proactive grinder pump maintenance on site. So that number, at least compared to the private operators, looks pretty good. The electric, as I said, we got these numbers from Kevin. That number, if you look back to the rate study that you guys did, they actually allocated $10,000 for the electric for us. It was based on the same allocation factor that they used for the other elements. So it was actually based on field maintenance hours. If you take that 10,000 and you apply the overhead factor, it was about $16,000 a year, which is about more than 3.5 times the actual cost. So it's not a big element of the cost, but it shows that there are some more accurate ways we can get at some of these numbers. Technology improvements, telemetry, remote monitoring is pretty common in the industry today. We would recommend that, or the engineer recommended that we do that for the 2 lift stations and drain field pumps. Runs about $5,000 to $10,000 per station. We get a every time we have a power outage, we get an alarm condition at both those lift stations that has to be silenced. It is a high flow alarm instead of a high level alarm. So we think if we go and make some changes to the controllers, we can take care of that to prevent that from happening. So he has to go out and silence those. Consider controller upgrades that may actually save us some money by going to single controllers for each station instead of 2 per each station as we do the telemetry. And then add the automatic wash down for the lift station pumps if we need to. Annual flushing of the drain field laterals. We've been going 15 years now. on those laterals. The engineer is recommending that we come out, we test the flow rates. We do a jet flushing, high pressure flushing of one of those fields, and then check the flow rates again, and we'll see if we've gotten any substantial buildup over those 15 years. Annual inspection of the grinder pumps, Correct Equipment has quoted us $125 per pump to come out and pull those annually to check them and do preventative maintenance. We think that's something we want to try and see if that can actually reduce our failures and potentially reduce our costs. And then obviously, as we try these, we're gonna have to evaluate how's that working, or, you know, is this something we need to continue to do over time? So the recommendations are that for that is, Beck Point kind of has three ways to go here. We can continue to work with the PUD to improve the system to meet those objectives that we talked about. We can hire an outside private company, or we can do a hybrid of PUD and private. In either case, we will be hiring this outside engineering firm to help us with technology improvement designs and to help us look at some of the data that we're getting in on the health of the system. And then we'd establish that operating reserve capital. And so, forgive this analogy a little bit because it won't be exactly accurate. So forgive me a little bit here, but we see our relationship with you guys. You provide three services to us: electric, water, and sewer. We see our relationship
And
with
maybe
you.
broadband someday. Who knows?
And maybe I keep looking at the map to see if we're on. Electric and water, you send electricity to the meter or water to the tap. It's on public owned assets funded through usage rates or bond issues. The assets are on public land and easements. You have a large pool of customers using those common assets. And it would be difficult or inefficient to separate that up by, you know, neighborhoods or groups or something. Alternatively, for the sewer systems, you got an operation installed for the exclusive use of a small group of residents. The assets were purchased by those residents in our case. The assets are on land owned by the community, and the replacement of the assets will be funded by the community. And each of those systems is independent, standalone, and unique in design. So we looked at that and said, well, how do we come up with a way of addressing this so that we're a very small, this is a very small portion of your business, and we don't want to get in the way or disrupt the way that you run this other big important part of the business. So how do we go about doing that? So what we're proposing is that we do a pilot program with you guys, that we continue to operate, you guys continue to operate our system, and over the next 12 months, we'll try some things out. We'll hire the engineer, Mike Morin. We'll work together to install the improvements, the enhanced preventive maintenance technology and improvements, and reduce those operating costs. We'll track those hours and costs to direct our efforts. Are we achieving the objectives that we hope to? We'll give all that information to Aqueous Solutions. They will provide summary reports to both us and you, so we can review that progress and costs. Our objectives would be to deliver that $50 to $60 per month rate, enhance the longevity, maintain the service, and leave the current rates at 64, 62 right now for those next 12 months. We think that's above what it should cost to operate this system. And then at 12 months, we evaluate that progress and glide path. How are we doing? Are we able to get down to those numbers? And then we will pay independently, we will pay for the engineering services. We will pay for those annual grinder pump inspections. And we will, working with you guys, design and implement those technology improvements. The other option is we go to hire an outside firm, which is not our first choice. And that would either be Dano Septic or Scholl. Scholl currently doesn't have the staffing to do it, but are trying to remedy that situation. We would hire Correct Equipment to manage the grinder pump failures. They've quoted a 24-hour turnaround on those replacements. Aqueous Solutions for engineering support, we would self-manage the drain field, and we would directly pay the state for the annual fees. So in summary, we want to keep working with you guys. We've got a long, productive relationship with you guys and we, and frankly, Randy is probably the best operator in the area. He does a great job. And we've got a good relationship working with him as well. We need to manage the cost down. We need to get down to that $50-$60 range. We are willing to pay for the system improvements and lead those design efforts, and industry benchmarks and best-in-class approaches indicate that we should be able to be successful. There's no reason we can't. We only require that you align on those objectives with us, help us track the hours and costs, and hold on those rate increases while we do this work. And then we'll proceed with the doing the design on the improvements regardless. We've already gotten time on the engineer schedule to work on designing some of those improvements. So before I forget, because I forgot this last time with Ken, we also separately we made a Information Act request to the state Department of Health back in 2023 July. And we received all the documents that they've had. We got like 500-600 pages of documents. A lot of those documents, the lion's share of those documents, you guys also have. But you have documents they don't have. And so we would like to make a request to you guys for those documents, but we want to do it in a way that's not overly onerous. We don't need to get all those same documents again. We just need the ones that you guys uniquely have. Likely the ones back from, 2005, 2009, when we're starting with the system. So we just wanted to work with you or Annette to figure out how can we make that request in a way that is most efficient for you guys to be able to meet that. So that's it. So basically what we're asking is that, you guys approve aligning with us to launch into the pilot program, so we can, move forward working on this together.
Great. Thank you for your presentation, very thorough. Dan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, again, like you, Jeff, thanks. That was a very thoughtful presentation. My question is for legal counsel and for the general manager. On the ownership issue, does that create any roadblocks to either of the options that they put forward? I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, I'll just turn it to Kevin, just maybe overall response to the presentation and what your thoughts are, and please respond to Dan's question too.
So, if Beckett Point chooses to go to a different provider, they have the right. There's some things that would have to be done. Joel would help us through that process. So there's no stumbling block there.
Well, my thought is, would there be any kind of liability if something went wrong with someone else coming in and having a part in, the operation or the maintenance, or even with the new technology, the telemetry, that sort of thing? How would that all mesh or harmonize with us, in any kind of partnership in particular?
Dan, I have that same question, that if two people are running the system, the PUD ultimately has maybe the deeper pockets that we would be held responsible if things did go bad. So there's some things that we can work on. There's things we have to research. It's gonna take some of Joel's time to help us. And then there's things that we probably will have a hard time agreeing to. But for right now, it's gonna take some time looking at things. I have to visit with Randy. As a PUD, our job is to take care of the public, not only in cost, but how we maintain and do things. I know for a fact, on other places, we do more than is absolutely required. And that's kind of what the PUD does, not only there, but on our water systems, our electrical systems. We tend as a public utility to keep our systems up better than a privately owned facility does. So, to compare to what Shoal charges and what we charge, it's a fair comparison from Becca Point's standpoint, but from the PUD standpoint, we do different things and we do it differently. We pay prevailing wage, you know, if we hire Shoal to go out there for us, they pay prevailing wage, but if Becca Point hires them, they don't pay prevailing wage. So, you know, to me, it's apples and oranges. We have a lot we can work through here. Between Mike and everybody else in this room, we can come up with some answers, but, hard to split the baby. So that's some of my concerns early on, and who would ultimately be responsible. If there's, a lot of things have to be worked out,
Okay,
so.
I kind of see, the way I'm seeing this thing is what you've done is looked at the system, reached out to both the designer of it and people who operate these kinds of systems and looked at, okay, what is a reasonable cost of service to operate our Beckett Point system? And then I look at what we've done when we've done a cost of service analysis, and I think it's done differently. I think it's done from, okay, here's the PUD's cost to do things. Here's our water department, here's our sewer section. We've had professionals look at it and say, based on the way you PUD operate, the way you do inspections, the way you pay your people, here's what it costs the customer for all these systems you have. And I think as Kevin said, it is kind of an apples and oranges thing. They're two valid studies, but they're looking at the issue, you know, differently. And the challenge I see is how do you blend the two? Because what I'm hearing you say is there's not necessarily contractors out there that could probably reliably show up and operate this system the way the PUD does. It sounds like there may be a shortage of assets out there, folks willing to do that. What is the current rate that they're paying? Was that the $64 number you had up there?
Yeah, 6462 is the current rate we're paying.
And what does our current adopted rate schedule say about future increases in that? What's our current schedule set at?
Mike's gonna have to look at,
2025 rate is, you guys have us going up to 115.36.
Okay, significant
But
increase.
it's board on the board perfectly, their rates did not get set like everybody else's rates did, it's reviewed each year. So we'll have to come forward.
So right now, in terms of the scheduled increase, there isn't an automatic, it's,
Yeah,
so when,
Beckett Point, well, the Beckett Point's sewer system does not have an automatic increase like the electric rates, the water rates and the other.
okay, and
sewer
what,
rates.
and do we know when staff was planning to bring that back to us to discuss? Is that gonna be part of the budget process, or how is that gonna work?
Yeah, we were gonna bring it back this summer, cause I think there was a time frame we were supposed to, I don't have all the details.
Okay, and
Right
so,
here.
so I'm sorry, set to go up in 2025?
Well, I was speaking to that original schedule that you guys did with that first rate study.
Okay, so Mike's saying it's not set, but there was like a recommendation in there or something.
The original recommendation back in 2021, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
how much
right.
again? 100 and what?
115.36.
115, okay. Well, I guess my question to Kevin is, you've got a very specific proposal. We've kind of heard what assumptions were built into it and maybe what of our numbers aren't necessarily built into it. We've got proposals for, hey, we're hearing that the industry and the engineers say it can be done this way. We've been doing it this way. How do you propose to kind of, you know, look at those things and I guess come up with a response?
so, one, we would go to Randy.
Okay,
And sit down with Randy and say, hey, we've been operating this way, and have him explain the reasoning behind it. And it may be that he got it from Jim Parker, who had the original design. That's my assumption also. Part of this will be, we'll reach out to our engineering firm that we use, HDR, full disclosure. And ask them some questions and say, hey, and so a lot of this is just gonna take us some time to visit with our staff, with, our consultants to make sure, we we as a PUD is protected, and then we'll bring that information back to the board.
Okay.
And say, you know, these are our findings. We maybe can cut here, or maybe we can't.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to meet internally to figure out how we feel about this information compared to what we're doing things, and then would you propose meeting with the Beckett Point folks before you come to the board?
Oh, we would, after internal meetings with our staff, then we'd go to HDR.
Okay.
Very similar to your guys' process. Once we had HDR's information, we'd come back and sit down with Beckett Point, and then after that, it would come back to the board
Okay.
as a.
Okay, that's not, to me, that sounds like a logical process. I see a hand up, I can't see who it is, Joel.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think two comments. One, you know, I agree with you all, it's apples to oranges because the PUD is obligated to proceed according to state law. And state law just has us do things that probably result in higher costs. That's just the nature of things. And you get, you know, as Kevin said, one of those are, you know, prevailing wages. We always pay prevailing wages. Excuse me. And
So if you're trying
second,
to sneeze there, take your time. Clear the system.
I'm all verklempt over this. Second, from my perspective, I think they should come up with a little more particular offer or just something a little more specific about what they're exactly asking the PUD to do or not do. From my perspective, to the extent that we have to revise ownership, operation agreements and the like, you know, I think that since this group is proposing changes, it would be helpful to see exactly what they have in mind from a legal structure. That's just, you know, my little corner of the world.
Okay, and I kind of had that question too. What legal agreements do we have in place regarding this system, and who are those legal agreements with?
We have an agreement with the Fishermen's Association, I believe.
Is that the landowner or one of the landowners?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we want to see the documents. We went through all our documents and we went through all the state's documents and we haven't found those documents.
Okay, so one question is, what are all these agreements? And that's one of the questions, yeah, is that something they asked, what would be the best way to work with staff on making sure they've got a full record of everything? What would you have a recommendation there?
So, full disclosure, we will work through Annette, because she does these things. But on some of our early water sewer documentation, we have struggled to find it. you know.
Okay.
So, we'll put Annette on the, if it was a resolution, those kind of things, it goes to archive,
Would it be okay for them to contact Annette directly? Because it sounds like they already have a list of here's what we have. And maybe if that could be provided to Annette, and that would then be, double providing stuff that they already have.
I'd request that they actually put a formal Public Records Act request.
Okay.
We can do that.
It's not a, it's
Sure.
not, that's just our process and that.
The process, put that together, and is there any reason why they couldn't provide a list of the documents they already have?
We can characterize those that we already have. I don't want to give you the 500 documents, but.
No, I'm just thinking of like the titles of.
Yeah, we can just characterize it.
Like,
Basically, we've got, every time you guys send a report to the state, we got a copy of that report.
Like the lost reports that.
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
and when you pay the bills and when they send you an email that says, please pay the bill, we've got all that kind of stuff. So we can characterize all those that we have. And I think our request would be very specific. We're looking for the documents for this period to this period.
Agreements, those type of.
Yeah.
and when we do that, do we basically say, here's the documents we have, and then give the requester the option of actually getting those, or how does that request get fulfilled?
We provide them electronically, there's things that So
Okay,
sometimes people wanna come in, sometimes they wanna have it printed, if there's costs for different ways.
so they'll be given options of how they can receive, okay, so does that make sense, that put in the formal request for information, and then you'd be working with Annette on.
Yes, that makes total sense. And
Okay.
I'll send the request in, and if you guys come back and say, hey, if you tweak it a little bit easier for us, that's fine too. Can I speak to a little bit what you were saying before, just to be clear, what we're proposing, working with the engineer and working on the system improvements, we're only talking about working with the same guy that designed the original system. Before we made any sort of conclusions about what makes sense for our systems, we absolutely would be working with you guys and working with Randy. I mean, Randy's got more experience than anybody on that system, so he's the first guy we're gonna be talking to about, does this make sense? How would you do it? And we're not gonna do anything without your oversight and approval. So it's not, we're not gonna be going rogue out there in the middle of the night making changes to that system. We're gonna be working directly with you guys, and we're gonna both agree that this makes sense, and only after working with you and with Randy. So I just, and
And I'll clarify, I don't think you'll go rogue. Some of my concerns are, I don't know if we can get our costs down where you say they have to be.
Yeah.
And that's a discussion that will take place during all of this.
Sure, so I just wanna make sure we have clear communication, what staff is proposing is to take your information, review it internally. Run it by the engineers that we currently have advising us on all water and sewer
Yeah.
matters, HDR. Then, once they've done all that, then meet with you and kind of go through it. And the differences, and then, once you've had a chance to discuss between the two parties, then bring it to the board. For kind of a summary and a further discussion, does that sound acceptable?
it does too.
And the only caution, I heard you talking about going to Randy. So I think what staff would probably appreciate is you not talking directly to Randy outside of this process. Let us get our act together, let us talk to our engineers, and then let us call you in, and then there's that chance for that discussion. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And other than the normal routine stuff we talked to Randy about. but-
Randy's a great guy.
Yeah. But no, but I just want you to know that we, what we're proposing here is a partnership, that where we decide on what to do together, and what we're proposing is that we learn together, and we may not be able to get to $50-$60. It may not make sense, but what we're saying is we work together and figure that out together.
Right, and I applaud you guys for taking the initiative. I think it puts staff in the PUD a little outside of its comfort zone to have this amount of direct interaction with the customers. But for me, it's like, it's part of the tension of being a public utility, that we're not just a company with shareholders and, the board of directors that we're reporting to, and the customer just ends up at the end of the tail. Finding out where it is at the end of the day. You have this opportunity to democratically get involved with your organization, but the tension is how much time we have to dedicate to a specific group compared to everything else we have to do.
Sure.
So it sounds like it's tenuously working, and please keep it up. And Ken, I don't know, do you want to stay involved in any particular manner as you have been?
If it makes sense, I'm not sure at this stage. Once it gets technical, that's really a bit beyond me. I have no special expertise in the area, but I certainly have appreciated the dialogue that we have had, and I want to applaud the committee at Beckett Point for a very thoughtful, reasonable approach. Personally, I think that option one makes a lot of sense. There's more information that needs to be gathered. If I can be helpful in any way, I'm happy to do that. So let's just try to go forward. They're requesting information from us. We need to do some internal research and dialogue. And I think the groundwork is laid for us continuing to have a very productive, cooperative relationship.
Okay, Kevin, do you have a rough time frame for when it might come back to the board? To give you, enough time to do all these other things?
Well, honestly, I can't spend a lot of time on this myself. We'll assign it to, others here. With our existing workload with HDR, I think they can work this in fairly quickly. I would ask for about 6 weeks.
Okay. So early June, something like that, late May. I'm doing the math right, I guess that's more like June. Okay. Any other questions or comments by anybody? Seeing none, thank you for.
Hey, Jeff?
Oh, sorry, somebody, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, so just like the previous discussion we had on the vegetation policy, again, this is something where we're in the middle, going to be in the middle of a rate study. Kevin's 6 weeks probably fits in that timeline for us to kind of try and figure out a path forward. But I would be mindful that we are going to do that rate study, and this is something that would be a component of that. So I don't know how that fits into the timelines that are being talked about, or any decisions that the board would need to make. Definitely by the end of July, I kind of look as a deadline because of knowing the budget process, and I don't know where we're going to be with the cost of service study and the rate study. So just again, timeline wise, we should keep that and take that into account.
Yeah,
And one other quick thing is, I know Joel mentioned something about a more dedicated and itemized ask. Again, how does that fit into what's been discussed as far as staff looking at things? What is Joel's opinion of when he would want to see something like that occur?
Well, I think the request for information that you're putting together would actually help us too. It's like everybody putting their collective heads together. What are the agreements that we're dealing with here? It would be good to get those out there so folks like Joel can advise us intelligently, knowing what responsibilities and agreements we have in place. So please get that in as soon as possible.
Okay.
Let us know somehow if you're running into
And some
roadblocks.
we'll start working on, and that will, she'll start prior to getting the request.
And I'll speak for Ken. I may not use the words he would use, but I think of the commissioners as kind of, you come to us when things don't seem to be quite going right. And so I don't know if Ken's available, if something seems to be getting off track with what we've talked about, maybe he's a resource for you. I don't know, do you agree with that, Ken? Yeah, I'm seeing head nodding.
We very much appreciate the time and support we give
Right.
Ken, so.
Great. Well, I think the process is working. It's not always, it's kind of that sausage making thing. It's not pretty, it's not fast, but hopefully we get there in the end. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else on that one, we'll move to the procurement manual item on the agenda.
So, Commissioner, real quick, we have a hard stop at 12 o'clock.
Okay,
So
11:27.
we're gonna not be able to really, we may not finish the procurement manual. If we don't, we'll bring it back next Tuesday, but we do have a hard stop at 12 o'clock.
Well, we've been through this procurement manual multiple times. I guess if we could start with, my mic's off. If we could start with, where did we leave this and what are you asking for us today? That would be a great beginning point. Cause I don't know that we need to go through a bunch of things we've already been through a couple of times.
What we're trying to do is get a comfort level so the board would entertain a resolution to approve the procurement manual. Last meeting, there was a question and we talked about an Excel spreadsheet that was put together between staff,
Right.
Ross Adams and Joel to show some of the differences and why we went with an RCW
Right.
or CFR requirement. So again, we may be able to get through, may not, but there is, I apologize, a hard
Okay.
stop at 12.
So will there be, so we had this request last time, we kind of asked for this bullet pointed more approach, which we have been gotten on budgets. Were you able to kind of piece that together? And are you planning to kind of give us an overview of that?
Well, and Dan's got his hand up, we don't get too far in.
Dan,
Yeah, to help expedite, I appreciate Mike sending out this information and staff and FCS getting that all put together. I don't have any questions. I think the information that came out, I looked at it all, and I won't have any questions to help expedite things at this point, unless someone has noticed something that I didn't. Everything seems to be in order. Thanks again for getting that information out to us in the form that you did.
Okay, and Joel, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Just to summarize again from our last meeting, I think what happened, the initial proposal back in the fall covered the first part, the original procurement requirements were the CFR requirements because our procurement policies hadn't incorporated the federal obligations that came with the grants we received for broadband. So I think the specific direction to Moss Adams at that time was, let's get up to speed on those, and they did a good job and included those. But in the mix of things, we had left out the small works roster requirements and things like that. The current version incorporated those. They got input from staff, from Will and Karen, and they did a good job incorporating those things. I took another look at that, and that's really what we're at. I mean, I don't think there's any mystery behind the procurement policy, other than incorporating the federal requirements for us so that we're on track. We can get audited appropriately and follow the federal rules along with the state rules, which we all, always had covered. We had adopted a policy, I think in 2019 or 2020, that revised consistent with the RCWs. So that was how I looked at it. And I can recommend to you that I think you have a full procurement policy that covers both federal and state requirements, and feel comfortable approving it.
Okay. And I'm just looking, I hadn't seen the email from Mike. Mike, how would you like to proceed?
If I could, Commissioner Tupper, one quick correction there. I said FCS. I want to give credit where credit's due. That credit should go to Moss Adams.
They will appreciate that, Dan. They will. So, I mean, we can go over, so we do have both the CFR, which is the federal code that we have to follow the RCWs are in there. The spreadsheet here kind of shows why they chose one over the other. Sometimes they chose the more stringent code to follow. This has been reviewed multiple times. I also have a presentation that they did 2 weeks ago that kind of highlights some of the different areas.
Yeah, I think the new document is this Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yeah,
Do
that's
you
not the
want
one.
to, just take a quick look at that and go through that briefly and see if we have any questions?
Yeah, we can. I mean, it just talks about the different aspects that we did, ability, which just talked about, whether the federal rules versus state laws, why they chose one over the other. The compensation, just, that we have to be competitive in how we do things. They do have the RCW allows, I'm just screwed so because I can't see what it says on the computer. Allows for alternative bidding, the small works roster, whereas the federal code doesn't necessarily do that. So they made sure that they did that, and they used the code, the 250,000, which is in the CFR. So they kind of did a combination of the two where it was needed. So that way we under both guidelines of it. They still allow us to do the sole source. They put the two different codes in there for both the federal and the RCW, and kind of how it fits into both of them. The procurement methods, there's a little bit of difference between the federal guidelines, the state guidelines. RCW, so the state codes require more formal at 30,000. While the CFR starts at 250,000, so they put kept the RCWs in there for the lower ones, just so we are covered by the state for doing something that's not grant related, and how we can be protected for the grants as well.
Okay.
And just the documentation, what documentation, is required between the two codes. What we have to do, kind of goes back to last week with the state auditor's office, our 2022 accountability audit. What documentation do we need to provide and make sure that we're following through to make sure that we are doing everything according to both the CFR, the RC. They don't look, the accountability audits don't look at the CFRs, they only look at the RCWs. So we have to make sure that we're in those guidelines, plus our own policies and procedures, so kind of makes us in line with what we need to do there on documenting those special purchases and stuff. Conflict of interest, kind of they're addressing it through both the CFRs and the RCWs. Incorporated as they can, the suspension of the department. CFR says you have to review this, if a contractor is suspended or debarred for any reasons, can't use them for grant reimbursements, the state doesn't say anything about that. But for the federal money, we do have to have that in there, and then how to go through the appeals process. They included both of the RCW more detailed, so that's the one that we can go more with. So that's really what Moss Adams did with this. It's hopefully a procurement manual. The one now, there was a lot of questions and it was hard to interpret. Everybody interpreted it a different way. With this new one, it helps, hopefully makes it where it's a little bit more interpretable for everybody. Everybody understands it the same way. We will reach out to Moss Adams once it gets approved, to have them do some trainings with staff. So that way everybody is on the same page and gets the thing, and then hopefully we won't have to make a few changes for a while, because the last one we kind of piecemealed together with some different changes as RCWs and stuff changed. But this will get us in line with our FERC grants where we are meeting the federal guidelines.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions? I'm kind of wondering if the multiple times we've looked at this and the actual body of the document, it doesn't sound like that's really changed since it was originally given to us, has it? The actual procurement manual itself?
There hasn't been a lot of changes. They just incorporated the CFR, rewrote it to make it read better.
Okay,
But no, as far as, it's basically been the same document that you saw last fall,
okay,
just updated, changed the word to make sure that both the CFRs and RCWs were in there.
the cross references were done correctly,
Yeah.
okay.
And
So
you could resend that, Jeff,
It was included,
Oh, in the
in the last email I sent to the commissioners. I sent the presentation from Moss Adams that highlights the different key changes, the spreadsheet here, and then also the draft.
Okay, and then going forward, we haven't adopted it yet, or we have adopted, okay.
have not.
So I'm kind of wondering if the other commissioners feel like with all this information, if it's in the packet next time, could we put it on a consent agenda? I think I'm seeing head nodding, I'm seeing
Yeah.
thumb.
Yeah, I'm good with that at this point, unless something in
Yeah.
the next week comes to light.
Okay, yeah, I think if you provide everything that you sent out in your email, if it's actually in the packet, just so that we've got it and the public's got it, I think we're covered. And if we have any issues, we can bring it and pull it off
Yeah,
consent.
so-
I'm seeing Joel nodding too.
Yeah,
Okay,
and so I'll get Joel to help me with the resolution for next week.
great. I know that's a very fast turnaround. Basically,
We have to get it done.
go for Thursday.
Yeah, before Thursday.
Okay,
So, but yeah, I'll get it there.
okay, we've reached the end of our agenda. Do we have anything else for good of the order or, if not, it is 11:38 and we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you next Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, commissioners.
Thanks, everyone.